Okay, yeah, my name is Catherine Doyle. I'm the Director of Science, Research, and Advocacy for the Performing Animal Welfare Society, also known as PAWS. Yay! Oh, sorry about that. I wasn't loud enough naturally? Okay. So, again, well, you know my name, she said it before. Anyway, so yeah, I work for the Performing Animal Welfare Society, also known as PAWS. I always like to start with one of my favorite cartoons here. Unfortunately, there are no elephants at the Philadelphia Zoo anymore. Yay. So, for those of you who are not familiar with us, PAWS was formed in 1984 to advocate and provide sanctuary for abandoned, abused, and retired captive wild animals, many from the entertainment industry and also from private owners as well. We operate 3 sanctuaries in California. Our largest sanctuary is a 2,300-acre ARC 2000, and that's where we care for 8 elephants, both Asian and African elephants, as well as big cats and bears. And at our other sanctuaries, we have emu, we have capuchin monkeys, we have a variety of animals. But we also work to educate the public, and we've been involved in a lot of legislation as well, and that comes under my position there. I love my job. I have like the best job in the world. So part of my job is advocacy. The other part is I get to go and watch elephants. I do behavioral observations for a long-term study that I'm doing with our female African elephants. 3 days at a time. I'm out there 5-6 hours a day just watching elephants. It's the best. I love it. So I also have elephants that got me started on my path for captive elephant protection. And that's Ruby and Gaeta, who were both at the LA Zoo. And in 2003, I became the plaintiff in a lawsuit because the zoo was going to separate Ruby and Gaeta. Ruby is in the foreground there. She's an African elephant, Gaeta in the background, an Asian elephant. The zoo decided that they were going to build a facility just for Asian elephants. So Ruby was no longer needed. Their plan was to send her to the Knoxville Zoo in Tennessee, where the zoo spin was that she was going to be an auntie for all the calves born in their breeding program there. Do you know how many calves have been born to date in Knoxville? 0. So what happened was, as part of the lawsuit, we filed for a temporary restraining order. It was a week right before Memorial Day weekend. And before the judge could actually issue an order or make a decision, the zoo shipped Ruby out in the middle of the night. That Sunday night at midnight, they trucked her out to Tennessee. Was not illegal, it was unethical. But anyway, we continued with the lawsuit. We had this amazing judge. And Ruby did her part too, because the zoo kept saying that if it didn't work out in Knoxville, that they would bring her back. Well, Ruby, every time they tried to introduce her to the dominant elephant there, she pushed her down. And more than once. So anyway, Ruby did her part. She was not integrating in with the other elephants there. And eventually, the mayor of Los Angeles, James Hahn, ordered her back to Los Angeles. And I always knew that if we got her back, we were going to be able to get her back out of there into the PAWS sanctuary. And that's exactly what happened. So, and it's kind of a long story with how it happened, but yeah. So that was 2003 that started. Ruby was shipped off back in 2004. She went to PAWS in 2007, and unfortunately she died in 2011. But I have to say too that she was not technically reunited with Gaeta. She and Gaeta were both in these separate stalls in an off-exhibit area when Ruby was brought back to the zoo. And Gaeta actually died in the stall next to her. She saw it happen, and it was prolonged, I'm sad to say. But the last time I saw Ruby was in that area, and she was swaying side to side just violently. The next time I saw her again was at PAWS. She was reaching up into a tree to grab an acorns. So, yeah, and there you can see it's Ruby at the bottom there at PAWS and at the top of the LA Zoo. So, so actually, what I'm going to talk a little bit about elephant-related bans. And of course, PAWS for many, many years was involved in trying to end the use of bullhooks on elephants. And in 2014, well, we led the charge along with the Humane Society of the United States in Los Angeles in 2014 to pass a ban on bullhooks. But I kind of want to lay a little groundwork for this because in 2012, I'd been looking at, it kind of did an analysis of circus-related bans around the country. And I found that basically they were in a lot of small towns. Some of these places circuses never even went to. But what the important point there is that we needed a large city. We needed to kind of break through that ceiling that, with city size, basically. And that's mainly because in the larger cities, that's where your major circuses went to. So we were able to pass a bullhook ban in Los Angeles in 2014, earlier in that year, and then later on worked with people up in Oakland to pass another ban there. And the importance of that, and I think there was talk before about small steps leading up to what we really want, right? We all want to be at the finish line first, but sometimes we have to have steps in between. And I feel that's what happened with the bullhook ban. Because it was, okay, so we passed the Bullhook ban in 2014, both in LA and Oakland, and those really were the first two regulations or first two bans that affected major circuses, being Ringling Brothers at that time and Universal as well. So that was 2014. 2015, Ringling Brothers announced it was going to end its elephant acts in 2018. Well, it was the next year, so early, they retired, they ended all of their elephant acts. That was 2016. By 2017, Ringling Brothers shuts down. So, and obviously there were a lot of different efforts that went into this, but I really feel that the legislation, for example, I really think Ringling saw the writing was on the wall and how things were changing. So, anyway, but really, well, and then of course later on, PAWS was a co-sponsor in California we passed a ban on elephant bullhooks in all of California. We worked with the Humane Society of the United States and the Oakland Zoo on that, and that was just enacted in January of this year. And then in Rhode Island, I also worked with HSUS, actually been working for years in Rhode Island to pass a bullhook ban there. And so I was happy to be working with Nicole Paquette there on that. But really, we're into our next phases now. And I did want to say, I mean, it depends on where you're at. I mean, some places, if you can get a ban passed on all, wild animals in circuses and traveling shows, great, go for it. If you can only, focus on elephants, go for it. But if what you need to do is a bullhook ban, if you need to do something, maybe, again, it's the idea of steps, So, but we are seeing, the next phases already, and there's bans now on elephants and traveling shows, both in New York and Illinois and the entire state. Also, bans on wild animals and traveling shows. New York City, San Francisco have passed bans. Los Angeles, PAWS led the ban there, and which is going to result in no wild animals in circuses and in shows there. And the language is being written right now. And then New Jersey and the state, there's a bill that's going to be pending. And that one actually started off as no elephants in traveling shows, and then is widened out to include all wild animals. And also I wanted to point out the top photo there, because bullhooks, I'm sure like everyone here knows what a bullhook is and how it's used. So the bottom is circuses, the middle is Bentwood Park Zoo, and the top, though, I believe is Oregon Zoo. But anyway, you'll notice he's using the bullhook backwards. He's actually using the blunt end of it there. And what I'm assuming he's doing is actually using it in a way that, we use in training something called a target, which it's, positive reinforcement training. The elephant's taught to move toward it. Versus with the bullhook, the elephant is taught to move away from the source of pain. So in essence they're using, if I'm reading this correctly, they're just mixing it all up, basically. They just don't want to give up those bullhooks there. So really quickly, keys to passing bans. First of all, I think you just need to be realistic about if something is passable in your city, county, or state. And you're gonna know that after doing your research. You need to know your issue inside and out. You need to know who your support is, who your opposition is. And also you need to know your lawmakers. Are you going to be able to get the support that you need to get your bill, get your ordinance passed? So I think what Julia talked about, and that is going to be meetings, having meetings with lawmakers, doing that work behind, in meetings in advance. And once that's done and you do have the interest, you do think you can get it passed, it's about choosing a strong sponsor for your bill as well. Because you want someone who has the gravitas, who has the influence on their board or on their council, and who's going to be able to get the votes and maybe sway some votes that they need so you can get your bill passed. You need to create a team of experts, or create a team. And that would include experts, subject experts that you can advise with, but also really knowing, finding people or having people on board who maybe have political connections, but certainly you want people who also know the process. I've actually talked to people who wanted PAWS to support one band or another, and who didn't even know what the whole process was going to be or what the next step was. So you really need to know all the ins and outs of it. And also, I would encourage you, too, to reach out to large animal protection organizations for your bill, particularly Humane Society of the United States. If you're working at the state level, that's who you need to be working with, because they have lobbyists in so many states. And but also, you know, I think sometimes smaller groups, too, are afraid that you're going to get stepped on, or that, you know, somehow, you know, I don't know, you're going to lose control of something that you started. But you know what, I'll tell you, these larger organizations, they're going to have resources that you don't have. They're going to be thinking of things that they can do to help pass your bill or your ordinance that maybe you haven't even thought about. So that's, I think, really important. And then, of course, later on, you'll be meeting with your lawmakers. You're going to need subject experts to provide testimony at hearings and to provide letters of support. You need to have a good support team. The way it worked for us was, say, on the California Bullhook ban, we had, you know, the Humane Society of the United States, PAWS, and the Oakland Zoo. And then we had a whole, so we were kind of, you know, the lead group, if you will. And then, but we had a whole support team working with us of different organizations, both, you know, California-based and national, and who were able to help us to get, you know, for emails, to have advocates emailing, making phone calls, and showing up at hearings. Media outreach, I don't know, I think everything's probably pretty much been said on media outreach here, but certainly to me, media outreach is about educating the public, educating politicians, and then finally, in compelling video evidence. If you have great video evidence, to tell the truth, in California for the Bullhook ban, we used ours sparingly, and we only used it when actually someone was really, you know, just kind of disbelieving, or they were on the fence maybe. And then too, you don't want to show, no one's going to watch 10 minutes, not even going to watch 5 minutes, they're going to watch a minute or 2 minutes of something. So if you do have that kind of evidence, you know, make sure it's concise, and you know, well, certainly when you're meeting with lawmakers, especially at the state level, you're going to have to be really concise. You're not going to be sitting in there with them for half an hour. So really what I wanted to get at as well in this presentation was, oh, am I at 20 minutes or did this never start? Uh-oh. I have no idea where I'm on time, so I'm just going to keep going. There's not that much more. But so anyway, but really, you know, free the elephants. What does it mean to free the elephants? You know, who do we free? How do we do it? You know, who gets freed first? How do we prioritize? How do we come up with a plan? So are we going to go need-based, you know, your sickest, your lamest elephants, your oldest elephants? The use of the elephant, are they being used in circuses, or are they in zoos or used for rides? Training method, you know, use of the bullhook. Quality of a facility, the amount of space they have, and as well as maybe, you know, how good an elephant program do they have, or are the people even who are, you know, the keepers, are they old school, or are they trying to be more progressive? And then also region of the country, you know, what the climate is like, because we know that in cold weather areas, elephants are going to be spending a good part of the year indoors, which is not good for them physically or psychologically. So obviously elephants in circuses, you know, are probably they are some of the worst conditions, you know, for elephants because of the travel, the chaining, the confinement, cruel training. But the truth is circuses are not likely to relocate their elephants voluntarily. They are private enterprises. And as far as the government goes, USDA is not going to confiscate except in the most extreme cases. And even then, I mean, it's very rare that they've confiscated. And in this political climate and this administration, I wouldn't be holding my breath for confiscations at all. So I really believe that legislation plays a big part when it comes to these kinds of private enterprises. And once, you know, for example, basically it's just as soon as you're putting that pressure on, you know, then what are these facilities going to do with their elephants? And quite honestly, again, the truth is they're probably going to want to sell them or send them to zoos. But, you know, we don't know that. So, and then elephants in zoos and other captive facilities. Again, you know, conditions really vary. Well, first of all, most of your elephants are going to be in AZA-accredited zoos. But even then, you know, conditions will vary from zoo to zoo. I mean, you're going to have, you know, I mean, everyone seems to think that San Diego Wild Animal Park, well, it's now San Diego Zoo Safari Park, you know, is a good place. You know, this is what people tell me. But But also, and I would say it is one of the better programs. Quite honestly, it is one of the better programs for elephants. But, and then there's other zoos, like the Topeka Zoo, which is not a good place for elephants. But it is also resource dependent. So it's how much space they have, again, what they're going to put into the program. So, but they are not likely to relocate elephants voluntarily. So as far as legislation goes, it really depends on, if you're going to try to go that route, it depends on the governance of the zoo. So you really need to know that. And your governance of the zoo is going to be, at one end, you're going to have private zoos, which means, privately run, which means, you're not going to be able to get medical records out of there or information about the elephants. You're not going to really have legislative options because they're not controlled by the government. The other side is publicly run. Actually, Oregon Zoo is publicly run, LA Zoo is publicly run. However, 81% of AZA accredited zoos are not government operated. There are fewer and fewer government operated facilities. So the upside of a government run zoo is that you will, through Public Records Acts, you will have access to information, to medical records from that facility, and there are legislative options if you have politicians who are primed, basically, and who are willing to take action and to use the control that a government would have over that zoo. And in fact, I was going to say with our Bullhook ban in Los Angeles, the reason I think that we were successful there was because we had primed not just city council. Well, first of all, people in Los Angeles had been hearing about elephants since 2003, since Ruby was shipped out. And we were able to keep elephants in the news there. And so the politicians knew, and people were learning the issues, and they were hearing the messages that zoos are, not a good place for elephants, that elephants don't belong in captivity. So we had primed the politicians, we had primed the populace as well. And I think that's really important. And that goes back to education and the media. That's all tied in together. I want to talk about phase-outs a little bit because I think this is something that, your plan A maybe is to try to relocate an elephant. Well, plan B is a phase-out. And right now, you see 26% of AZ-accredited zoos have only 2 elephants. They're not even meeting their own elephant standards. And a lot of those places are smaller facilities maybe, they don't have resources. 22% have 3 elephants, and so you're talking about 48% of AZ-accredited zoos with elephants are in a position to potentially have to phase out because once they say lose 1 elephant, that means either they're going to have to move out a remaining elephant or they have to bring in more elephants. And then to meet current standards, they're going to have to expand, and that's going to take a lot of resources. There is no shame in getting a zoo to say that they're going to phase out their elephant program. In fact, looking long term, that's huge. And finally, you do have to look at if the zoo is making significant changes to address welfare, and is that maybe the best way to be using your campaign and your efforts? Because I'll tell you too that with elephants, and I think a lot of times again we have our the eye on the prize, but we have to remember sometimes that, or maybe it is a matter of even trying to improve conditions at a facility. Because, I was working on one campaign. I was the IDA elephant campaign director for 9 years there. And we worked on one campaign where they never, it was a zoo where they never rototilled the soil there. So those elephants couldn't dust. And dusting is a really important behavior for an elephant. So we put pressure on them, and they finally rototilled the dust. And those elephants, oh my goodness, it was like, they were just dusted and dusted and dusted. It's like clouds and clouds of dust because they can finally do that. So again, a lot of these cases, it's going to be hard to get an elephant relocated, but don't forget that maybe you can also help make some improvements there. And even something small, because even I'll tell you in that campaign, the activists there, they just didn't get why I was so excited that the elephants could dust, but it was really important to the elephants, and you have to keep in mind the individual. And in fact, even in some cases, it might not even be the best idea, maybe for a particular individual, maybe it's even not a good idea for them to be moved. There was one zoo, again, that I worked on, where there was a consensus among sanctuaries, among vets, and among animal protection organizations that this elephant should not be moved. And this isn't a case where the zoo was going to be building a much larger facility. And this was an elephant who had these severe psychological problems. I mean, she I forget, she spent like 5 or 6 years literally just sedated. She was doing things like digging her tusks into her back leg. She was hurting herself. And so, like I said, amongst us, we decided that maybe it was better, since they were going to improve conditions, maybe it was better that this elephant not be moved, because they had finally gotten her to a point where she wasn't doing those behaviors anymore. And we thought, okay, you know what, this is, so again, think about, you always have to think about the individual elephant. It's not about us, it's about them. So, and take advantage of the fact that public attitudes are changing. You know, we see circuses are under more and more pressure now to end the use of animal acts. That Gallup poll, was it 59%, 69, I have my glasses. 69% of Americans, you know, are concerned about animal treatment circuses. 57% of Americans concerned with the treatment of animals in zoos. And in fact, zoos are struggling, you know, they're trying to counter what they see as a declining public favorability. And they're struggling to increase their relevancy in today's society. And they also see that the times are changing, that people's attitudes are changing. And also, the other thing that zoos know through their own polls is that visitors prioritize animal care. So that's another thing to think about there. And finally, elephants are a long-term commitment. So things that you can do, again, I mean, I can't tell you enough, public education is such a huge investment to make. Keep your elephants in the news, and I'm going to point out Aline here. Even when there isn't, because you know, for the media, they always want something new, right? So even when there isn't something new to talk about, Aline was brilliant at coming up with ideas and being really creative and ways to get the media to keep doing stories on the elephants at that zoo, at the Woodland Park Zoo. So you definitely, you know, being creative is very important. Also, again, kind of what Julie was talking about, you know, meeting with politicians in advance, and even, you know, before you're, you know, just before maybe you're going to take an action. And really educating them. And even, I mean, it's not a bad idea, you know, to work for a politician. You know, if there's someone, you know, who is sympathetic to animal issues and that, you know, get out there and support them. And let them know that you're supporting them too. It's going to, you know, benefit the animals in the long run. For zoos, I would also say, I think it's important. Oh, actually, I left out a line there. Focus on conditions, on the conditions rather than care, because zoos are always going to be able to come back and say, we're providing proper husbandry, you know, we're working on their feet, you know, providing proper nutrition. But what they can't do is they can't provide the conditions that elephants really need to thrive. They can't provide those large natural dynamic spaces that elephants with their keen, intelligent minds need, and of course, you know, the social aspects. Again, just keep in mind that phase outs are definitely, that's a win. It's a long-term win. And you have to be in it for the long term. That's what it comes down to. So thank you. I don't know how long I took, but that's Ruby. I want to point out, so that's the elephant who set me on the path to where I am today. And also PAWS, I have to do a little plug here. We have our International Captive Wildlife Conference in November, and that's in Burbank, which is like kind of same as Los Angeles. But yeah, so if you're interested, you can go to our website and get more information about that. So thank you.